Wouldn't you know it? Didn't work. Collar ballers and a brofist to you all. Emma, who is joining us from across the room. Emma, I'm actually asking you a question. Emma! Emma!
What?
Can you close the blind, please?
I can't.
Yes, you can. Do it, do it, do it, do it.
Right, seriously, I genuinely can't.
Please.
I can't.
Please.
I'm going to die.
You're not going to die. You've got full health. I can see your health from
Just
here.
one sec.
Okay, she's going to close the curtain in a minute. I just realised that the fucking sun is shining through us. Alright, brofist to you all and welcome to Friday's Daily Preach. I hope, for the love of God, you have finished whatever you've been doing this week, including not... This is going to go horribly wrong. There's Emma and a dog in the room, and a light. There's Emma, a dog, and the light. This is doomed to failure. Doomed to massive failure. T-minus probably 2 minutes until Ben knocks this tripod over. He's currently lay on the floor, but how long will that last? I have no idea. I was toying with an idea of this. But I don't know. Emma seems to think it's a very bad idea. Very, very bad idea. I don't know. Can I trust you guys? Can I trust you guys? I don't know. People say it might be distracting. It might be distracting. It could be. It could be distracting. Recipe for disaster. So I'll give it a couple of minutes. Nope, 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 nope. Spam incoming. I kind of figured that as well. Tiddy Sprinkles. Okay, we lasted 2 minutes until Tiddy Sprinkles, so that means that idea is out. Okay, Emma's going to close the blind for us whenever she feels necessary to tell me she's not dying when I can clearly see she's at 100% health. I hope you have finished school, work, whatever it might be on your Friday. I hope you are feeling fantabulous. We had new toy day, which is fucking awesome. Look, I have a button. A button. Look at this button. This button starts me recording shit. This button is like, bah! This moment is really cool in the game, and now I can record stuff. And you'll also notice that we are broadcasting in 1080p. 1080p, and hopefully everything is coming through fantabulous for that as well. Quite frankly, we've got some new toys. I also have a pop filter, as you can see here, which will stop in the videos that poo that you hear every now and again. That should be all nice and clear now, because we've got a pop filter, and everything sounds fucking awesome. Yeah, I know the light has disappeared now, right? But it's totally going to come back. Can you please close the blind? Oh, the rage. She has to separate herself from Guild Wars for 2 seconds. Has to separate herself away. The Transmog competition is now closed. Okay, it's now closed. And over 200 of you applied for that, which is pretty crazy and a lot of work for us to do. That's okay, though. We can tolerate that. That's fine. Ghosty has been sifting through them for most of the day. I believe he has picked the winners.
Okay.
So the winners are chosen, in which case, stop sending them. If you're watching this on YouTube, too late. The winners have already been chosen, unfortunately. But some of you sent in some really, really good ones. I was talking in the chat earlier about how many of you play Draenei's. Or are you picking Draenei's for your transmog characters because they look cool? What was really nice to notice is the guys who probably never gave a shit about transmog at all, in any way, shape or form, suddenly started submitting stuff round about this afternoon, which pretty much indicates that you rushed out to get transmog gear just to enter the competition, which is awesome that you went out and explored some old content or did whatever it was that you needed to do in order to take part in the competition. So we much thank you for that. A couple of things came up in the chat that I want to address as teasers. I do like to tease you before we move on to gaming stuff. I wrote the ending of The Way of Warrior 2 yesterday. Someone brought up how sad the end of The Way of the Warrior 1 is. It's not that sad, but it's a bit bittersweet, was the word described by this wonderful chat. I wrote the other ending yesterday, and it's sadder. I expect tears. I want tears on New Year's Day. I want you to cry on New Year's Day, which is the release date of The Way of the Warrior 2. I expect tears. I hope to start filming in the next couple of weeks, getting things filming. So watch out, especially if you're on Sylvanas. People in Stark Industries, if you're watching, please watch out for any sort of things where we need you to help to create sort of epic scenes and stuff like that. There's a few scenes in there that need contribution from other people. I need to keep it reasonably quiet. Where I will announce those things are probably going to be on the forums and not via the daily, so we don't get trolled times and such and such. On top of that, a lot of people asking, will my warrior be Tauren as he was Tauren in The Way of the Warrior 1? No, he will not. He will stay as an orc. But there's a reason he will be an orc, so that has been rectified somewhat. That should be all cool. So I'm really excited to start filming. Once we start getting some shots in the can, so to speak, I'll be more and more pleased with where we're at with that. So that sounds pretty cool. Okay, today's subject is going to be 10 versus 25 man raiding. I'm going to do a lot of talking about 10 versus 25 man raiding because it's a huge topic. Hopefully a lot of you have been registering your points of views and have some stuff ready to contribute. As you were aware, this topic was going to come up.
Yeah.
I will take the question first when I do this. Emma, stop talking. Please.
Telling me to stop talking.
So stop talking. That would be great.
Stop.
Shh. Okay, otherwise you can't stay anymore. The question was regarding tank healing. Now, it is healer themed week. Now, I made a huge mistake with my healing stuff. The video that I filmed with Blubzor and Elfie, APCO, which I actually think is fantastic to get their points of view. There's so much experience there which can help you newcomers, especially with moving into healing and what it's going to be like in a new expansion, their insights. Part 1 was just about how are we going to cope with the opening of the expansion. Just some theories about getting into heroics. A lot of it was a little bit... I fucking knew it! Ah! Don't lie on the floor.
Don't shout at him.
Get out! Out! Out!
Give him a tummy.
Out!
Give him a
Get
tummy.
out! Give me the camera.
Wait, I'm killing
No,
this.
no, Emma, really. Such a Mickey Mouse operation. I can't believe how fucking Mickey Mouse this shit is sometimes. Really? It's so amateur. It's so low tech. It fucking hurts. It's so low tech. Oh, I knew it! Didn't I tell you that was coming? My God! He just went, fuck this shit, and just went at it. Oh, I knew it was coming. I absolutely knew. And the worst part is, I'm doing a live show, which is my job, right? I'm working right now. This is how I make my money. I ask Emma to just pick the camera up, and she says, no, I'm killing something in Guild Wars. The fuck is that? Seriously, what the fuck is that? My God. Anyway, we're back in action. We're back in action. I fucking knew it was coming. So knew it was coming. Okay. Yeah, so I was releasing the Healer 2 video today. In part 2, we discussed gemming, enchanting, and we also discussed some other stuff about leveling and all that kind of stuff because the guys are pretty determined to cap and all that kind of cool shit. But unfortunately, I somehow corrupted the audio file of me. I have the guys answering the questions, but the audio file containing me asking the questions is missing. So I'm going to have to do some fidgeting with that video in order to make it work. Probably do some voiceovers and reenacting of me asking the questions. Slightly less natural, but their information is really cool, so I will get that out to you as soon as possible. Probably Sunday now, because we're preparing for the Academy Awards of Cataclysm. You can still vote on your favourite things on the Preach Gaming forums until tomorrow. I'll be closing that tomorrow. I'm going to be making all the sort of slideshows. It's going to be funny, so please try and tune in tomorrow around 8 PM. That's 3 hours from when the daily comes out. That time tomorrow on Saturday. Grab yourself a beer, grab yourself a pizza, wherever you are. Chill the fuck out. It's going to be ridiculously bad. It's going to be me and Ghosty. We're going to be wearing the suits. We've got some little splash videos. We're going to try and do it as cheesy and as low-tech as fucking possible. Hopefully you'll really enjoy it. I hope so anyway, and of course we're going to be announcing the winners of the Transmog competition. So overall it should be pretty fantastic, I hope so. Today's question, I just want to get out this out of the way before we move on to our main subject. It was a pretty good question. And thank you for all the guys sending me Planet Side 2 beta keys. It's awesome, I'm going to be trying that out. Hopefully they're not all just things that are trying to corrupt me with a virus. Tank healing. This is from a guy who's in a 10-man guild, okay? The 10-man guild consists of a Resto Shaman and a Resto Druid, and those are the 2 healers. A little bit worried first off that there's only 2 healers in this 10-man guild. You're going to need 3. You're going to need 3 in Mists of Pandaria. All the 10-man content is pretty much designed around 3 healers. And he's worried about the change from being a raid healer to a single target healer. And how does he need to gear differently and that kind of stuff. Healing is not one of the things that you can really set a precedent for how to gear. It's one of those things that evolves and changes as time goes on, and how you feel about the boss fights. Resto Shaman more so than others, I find. I know the very dedicated Resto Shamans I've played with were often sort of carrying 2 Resto specs at least, and also trying to get at least 2 sets of gear for different fights. Some fights promote haste, some fights promote mastery, and the really dedicated guys were going for alternate sets of gear and stuff. So it's not uncommon to find healers confused about how to gear up. Should we go for more mastery here? Should we go for more haste? Should I get more intellect? Do I need more spirit? The ultimate answer that I gave away in a lot of the older basic guides is it comes down to your personal feelings. How do you feel in that fight? Are you finishing that fight with just 100% mana or 80% mana? In fact, if you're finishing the fight and it's a pretty intense fight, we're still with above 30% mana, you probably have too much regen and you can afford to sacrifice some of that for a bit more intellect to get a bit more throughput. You'll make sure your heals are actually slightly more effective. Your heal's just not landing quick enough, then you need a little bit more haste. Do you need more access to your global cooldowns, a bit more haste? Or is your mastery going to benefit a lot here, especially if you've got something like deep healing, like the Resto Shames? Is your raid constantly below 100% health? Are they always low on health and your mastery is just going to stack and stack and stack? So I cannot actually give you a definitive answer to a healing question of that nature. No healer can. Some classes it's easy, okay? Some classes just go, just get more int, you'll be fine. Our mana regen doesn't work the same as other classes. But in terms of Resto Shaman, which is this question's about, it's more a case of how do you feel on that fight? How does the fight work? If the fight needs sudden burst healing, then you probably need a little bit more haste. If you're always running either remanage your heals, but if you feel you've maximized how you're healing that fight and still going maybe you need a touch more regen. If you're not feeling like the heals, if your heals are there, they're fast enough, but they're just not as effective, maybe you could use a little bit more spell power. Remember, we're moving into an era where mana bars are fixed. Our mana bar is a fixed amount. All we're now judging is our regen, our spell power, our haste, and our mastery, essentially. Those are the things we care about. Let's work at it. Healers have a great thing going. I wouldn't want to spoil it by putting them down the path of, say, a DPS, which is you just gem and reforge this way, and that is the best you can do. Healers always have some leeway. It's a very nice thing that healers have. I really like it. I hope you guys embrace it. So if you ask me a question like, should I gem this way or that way? The answer is simple. I don't know. You know, because you know your specific gear set and how your team does the fight. If you're mainly doing single target healing, perhaps you just need a little bit more spell power because your tank's generally going to be dipping up and down quite a lot. Perhaps if you're doing a lot of raid healing and the raid is lower, you need more mastery and so on. It's all down to your decision process. Don't be afraid to make a decision. World of Warcraft possibly has too much information going out there. With healers, it's all a little bit of a gut instinct, and I really like that about them. I hope you like it too, and I want you to embrace that. Get excited about it. Get excited about, ooh, I think I should go for a bit more mastery here. That's a decision you're making that you're not just ripping off somebody else. Ooh, I wonder why this is happening. Ooh, you know I could do this. That's something fantastic. It's really good. It's something you can get involved in and be immersed in your character, so I really encourage it. I really, really do it. Okay. 10 versus 25 man raiding. This is a big kettle of worms. Can of worms. Kettle of worms? A desk of Cheez-Its? A drum of jam? Name that what that's from. A desk of Cheez-Its. Okay, so a big can of worms, this one. I think before we get into this, we need to understand the history. And I hope you guys have got some shit to sort of contribute towards this. 40-man raiding was where it all started. Many of us who've played since vanilla will understand what it felt like to be invited to your first full 40-man raid. For most of us, it will have been Molten Core, possibly a Nyxia if you were there at that time as well. And essentially, one of those two raids will have been your first 40-man raid. I can't explain how cool that was, but this is a time when we need to hark back a little bit. I need to get a bit historical on your ass for a second, is to talk about, this is a time where things like serious player character mechanics weren't up for discussion. They weren't. It wasn't uncommon to see, I had a warlock in my first 40-man guild who always wore the pirate hat. He always wore it. He always wore it. Our basic stats were hit, spirit, intellect. That was about it. Very rare was anybody hit capped. Very rare to find somebody who was hit capped, let alone was keybinded and played correctly. Serious things like hit cap just weren't a concern. This is a time when dots were limited on the bosses. You had 40 people and limited amount for dots. There was a certain limited space. You could only have a few on there. So you certainly couldn't do something like bring a lot of warlocks. There just wasn't enough dot space on the boss for them. Shadow priests were a non-viable class and spec. They just weren't around. Some people had Shadow Priest. My final 40-man raiding guild had a Shadow Priest. He was fucking useless. An absolute waste of a raid spot. He had better gear than most casters in the raid, and had been some sort of friendly face for whatever reason, and managed to get the Shadow Priest spot. It was a waste of fucking time. It really was. Legendaries. Nobody knew anything about legendaries. The first legendaries often went to hunters and stuff. Little did anybody know how powerful a tanking weapon Thunder Fury was. It went to anybody who could get it. Remember that thing said warriors, rogues, hunters for Thunder Fury because it had agility on it. A lot of hunters got the first bindings because we just didn't know anything about them or how important that kind of itemization was. Moving on, other legendaries. Wasn't uncommon to see your Resto Shamans wearing a Sulfuras. The Hand of Ragnaros, that was a two-handed mace. They had to respec in order to carry a two-hander, but they would do that. They would be Resto Shamans who didn't carry the best spec. Having a Protection Warrior. Now remember, this is a time also when all the tanks were warriors. There weren't such things as bear tanks, Protection Paladins, Death Knights weren't in the game. They just didn't exist. All the tanks were warriors. Very rarely, ever, were those warriors Protection spec. Very, very rarely. Extremely rare to find a warrior that was Protection spec. In fact, the only requirement of most warriors, even the DPS warriors, was to spec up to Last Stand. You had to do that. As a guild requirement, you had to spec Last Stand. Spec choices weren't really in the game. Mages, you were Frost. Until around AQ. That is most of the game. Until Ahn'Qiraj, most mages were Frost. And had to be Frost. Ragnaros could only be hit by Frost. He couldn't be affected by fire. Arcane was laughably bad. Paladins could only be holy. So Ret and Prot were both completely broken. Moonkins didn't exist. Feral Cats didn't exist. Feral Bears didn't exist. If you were a Druid, you were a healer. You were a Resto Spec healer. And you essentially spammed Healing Touch. These were all the things that were going on at the time of Vanilla. Very crazy to a lot of new players, and not a lot of new players, to think that we had so many more raid spots, but so much fewer variety of players. All the rogues were essentially combat daggers and eventually combat swords. That was about it. There was nothing else to do. As a priest, you were holy. You weren't Dis. I went Dis for a while for power infusion and got called a noob. I was a priest during Vanilla. A very crazy time. Really weird. A lot of fun though. A lot of fun. There was a feeling moving into 40-man raiding that is just inexpressible right now. I just can't convey what it felt like to be stood around 40 people, to log onto Ventrilo or TeamSpeak, as it was, and see 40 names in a list, and so many other people never spoke. I remember just nobody ever speaking in a 40-man raid, besides a 10 or 11 people who had a really, really good time. The rest of them would stay majority silent, listen to music. But Blizzard encountered a problem. 40-man raids were a logistical nightmare. However, there was a lot of them. The reason was, we needed 40 people for a raid. You would invite anybody and everybody who would show up to raid. Blizzard saw this as a bad thing, and so did the guilds, okay? I think, personally, that is a huge mistake. For the good of the game, I think that is a huge, huge error that was made very early in the game. So, bosses, Blizzard obviously understood that guilds consisted of a core of about 25, maybe 30 people in the best of the best guilds. In the best of the best guilds, 25 to 30 players. In the average 40-man raiding guild, around 10 or 15 players were actually the players of the guild. The rest of them were there to make up the numbers. It wasn't uncommon to see a lot of raid guilds going with about 30 to 35 to Molten Core, and still doing pretty well. Still doing pretty well. The bosses, in turn, due to Blizzard being aware that a lot of guilds were carrying people in order to fill this 40-man environment, had to be tuned in such a way that they just weren't that difficult. It was pretty normal to see most of the raid dead at the end of a Molten Core boss kill. That was pretty fucking normal to see that. And it was no issue. It was accepted. It was the norm. It was pretty normal. As we progressed through the tiers, up to around Ahn'Qiraj, when you got to bosses like Huhuran, some of you won't know Huhuran, and certainly a lot of you will never have done Huhuran at the appropriate level. Huhuran was the first time, I think, where it was required that pretty much all of the raid performed. Now that's a lot of bosses that didn't require a lot of people to perform. Blackwing Lair certainly didn't. Blackwing Lair did not require a lot of the raid to perform. You get lucky on the first kill and perhaps have the majority of the raid alive, but you didn't need everybody to perform. You were still carrying people wearing pirate hats, still people wearing the most ridiculous gear, all the way through Blackwing Lair. Ahn'Qiraj rolls around. First boss, Prophet Skerem, could be killed by any guild. Prophet Skerem was ridiculously easy. The Bug Trio, soon down, was an optional boss and was skipped by many as they were pretty difficult. They required dispels of poisons. Pretty difficult stuff and fears going on. You needed good people there. But moving through, I want to say not Curinax. There was a bug guy. The bug guy. He looked like Curinax. He was just a big bug that wiggled around. Fancris. Fancris the Ungi. Fancris, yeah. Fancris. Yeah, Nature Resist. Oh, okay, everyone getting all sort of remembering and stuff like that. I like that. I'm like going to taking you back. Hell, yes, correct. It's 1326 just pointed out. We're talking about a time in game where you had to visit Moradon to get your gear for Ahn'Qiraj. Crazy things like that were going on. But again, Blizzard had to tune the bosses along the assumption that you were carrying a significant portion of the raid, and they were just there to fill spots. The optional bosses, I think Blizzard did something quite clever, is introducing optional bosses that were significantly more difficult than most of the instance. Uro, for instance, if you ever fought Uro at an appropriate level, Uro was particularly difficult, required a lot of threat management, a lot of AFKing and wanding from mages. Remember, we're now in a time where people wanded for DPS in order to just pass time because tanks couldn't manage their threat that effectively. Wanding was the norm. Wanding Onyxia to death was pretty normal. There was nothing strange about people wanding Onyxia to death. It was pretty normal. Visidius. Visidius, being killable, was extremely difficult. Only killed by a few guilds in the world at the appropriate level. And then, of course, the last boss is Twin Emperors. Twin Emperors was one of the major fights that really, after Huhuran, required you to have a pretty good fucking raid. Now we're talking where people need to have 30 good players to get through that. 30 good players could handle the Twin Emperors. Then we reached Cthulhu. Cthulhu, got 30-35 people needed to be really good to handle Cthulhu. Interesting time. Blizzard moving away, trying to make the content more difficult, but are now naturally blocking a lot of guilds from ever being able to compete with that. If you weren't a cutting edge guild and stealing the best players from the previous guilds, you had no chance. There just wasn't possible to find 40 people in one environment who could handle these bosses. And that's where Naxxramas comes in. Naxxramas comes in, legitimately called the best instance ever created. Possibly Ulduar is up there as well. There's a debatable match for Naxxramas. But guilds just could not handle Naxxramas. Finding 40 people who were not only geared and able to play at a Naxxramas level was incredibly difficult as well. A couple of easy bosses in there. Stronghold to Vesuvius was not difficult by a sort of raid standard. But moving further in there, some really, really super difficult bosses going on there. So this is obviously a huge issue. We've now got content being created that is unkillable by the majority of guilds. That's not a good sign. I don't agree with that in any way. Creating content that is unkillable by guilds due to a simple sort of bureaucratic situation is really bad. Because now you're wasting your time. So Blizzard's obviously unhappy. They've created Naxxramas, this huge four-winged zone. Excellent, excellent bosses. A real lot of attention of detail going into the mathing out of killing these bosses, specifically the Four Horsemen. Lots and lots of mathematics required in order to plan that boss out. And nobody can do it. The guilds are just too big. We're having to carry too many people. But now we're designing bosses that need to be killed by 40 people, but we've got guilds that can't possibly get 40 good players. It's just not possible. So the decision is handed down. We should reduce the raid size. We need to bring it down. We need to bring it down to 25. But we've got two types of guilds which are the majority of the player base. Remember, Blizzard doesn't care too much about the top-end world guilds. They can't give those guilds too much attention. Let's call them testers for now. The real majority of the people lie in this casual area who didn't see Naxxramas and more likely did not see a lot of Ahn'Qiraj. So what do? As we said earlier, in general, a lot of these guilds are carrying 25 good players and the worst ones below are carrying about 10 good players. So what do? We need to reduce the raid size. Let's reduce it to 10 and 15 man. Let's do that. 10 of 25 man. Now, if you were playing in vanilla and this decision came out, it was met with only one reaction I can really remember, which was joy. Real joy and happiness that this was coming into the game. 10 and 25 man rating by the good players is what I want to say there. By the good players, they were extremely happy. The people who were really pissed off by this are understandably the people who were getting carried. They were really pissed off with this change. Unanimously, it was generally a favourable decision. Really a favourable decision. Blizzard was quite open and honest in saying that 10 will be relatively easier than 25 due to logistical issues, as they call it. I think logistical issues overall is an umbrella bullshit, such as casual gamer. I think the casual gamer tag is an overall umbrella of bullshit. The logistical side of things is an overall umbrella of bullshit. So the good players and the people who are a bit egotistical about these things and didn't really consider the epic loss of going down to 25 or 10 met with real open joy, because we can now kick those 15 arseholes or 25 or even 30 arseholes who we have to have in our roster in order to create a 40-man raid. Remember, if you're part of the slacker team who gets carried, sure, a lot of these guys are the guys who turn up all the time. That's why you're in the guild in the first place. You're part of the carriage team because you keep turning up. So you're always there, you always fill the spot, we always have the 40-man raiders, and you're guaranteed to be the first person swapped out if another good player logs in. Because you'll come back tomorrow, you're happy with your position, you get your items and you move on. So these 25 good players, or 10, 15 good players, are really happy about kicking this slacker roster. Let's cut the fat, as it was called. It was called cutting the fat, the same as businesses do. We've acquired a lot of fat over the years. We've acquired people who had a job at the time. No longer does that job really exist, but now we can get rid of them and move on in a different way. And it was very easy. A lot of the techniques that I found out and saw for reducing the fat. Now you've got the situation where you need to kick a lot of people. Don't be under the impression that when this decision was made to move away from 40-man, is most guilds planned out who their 25 were within the first 10-15 minutes. They knew their core 25, they knew who they wanted to play with. One guild in particular I know belonged to Alakir. And I know this because I'm friends with some of those players today. They created, I just want to use them as an example. They had a guild on Alakir. Now they just, no, this can't be happening. The sun is back. Okay, I'm going to lean over here so it's not an issue. So they made the decision to server transfer and make everybody from their guild reapply. I believe the 40-man guild was called The Void, from memory. That's from memory. The 40-man guild was called The Void. They then joined the server Sylvanas or Balnazar. One of those two. I can't remember what server. I think it might have been Balnazar EU. Suddenly, this guild called Celebrity appears on Balnazar. The Celebrity forums were hidden, but I had a friend in Celebrity, a friend who I still have to this day, and he said, check out our forum, maybe this guild is for you. Why don't you have a think about it? So I did, I checked it out, and it was a private forum that wasn't listed. The guild hadn't been mentioned at all on our realm, but these guys were coming. And they made everybody from the Void who wanted to be hardcore. This is when the term hardcore really started to fly around. We only want the hardcore players. That's all we want, is the good hardcore players. And it's stuck with us for many a year. They made all the players reapply. Now all those people who they thought were their friends and were guaranteed spots because they'd been in the 40-man guild forever, suddenly was not happening. You weren't getting invited. In fact, you were getting a lot of shit saying, well, I hope you changed this behaviour. Why don't you change this behaviour? Why don't you do this better? Your DPS wasn't that great. All this kind of stuff. And these are your friends who are quite openly saying, we don't want you in the fucking guild. We know who our 25 are. As soon as they apply, they're getting accepted. The guys they don't want got a really hard time. And it was always under the bullshit answer of, we're going more hardcore now. We don't think you are hardcore enough. A very easy get out of jail free card. Ultimately, 10 and 25 became the normal in the Burning Crusade. So we started off with a 10-man dungeon, Karazhan. Karazhan presented a lot of problems for the new 25-man guilds because you can't realistically fit 25 people into a 10-man raid. You can't fit 25 people into two 10-man raids. So a third 10-man raid had to exist literally just to gear the mains, and now you can't run them on the same day because now you need alts and stuff to come into there. Of course, a good roster probably had about 30-35 people, but now you've got 35 people who need to be in Karazhan. 35 people now need 4 10-man raids, so the alts still existed. A lot of crossover, a lot of issues. I ran into this issue.
Yeah, I've got that.
The reason I never applied to the big guild like Celebrity in the first place was purely because I had made the decision, being an evil, conniving git, that I was going to cherry pick the players I knew from Balnazar to form a new guild called the Dark Light, and I was to be the guild master and so on and so forth. So I did that. I cherry picked those players and I formed my own 25-man guild and had the pleasure of people like Genji joining, Ghost, Blubzar. No, Blubzar wasn't there. Other people like that to join my guild. And it worked very well. And I know for a fact I collapsed a couple of guilds in doing so because I took their core players who wanted to play with me. Really good time and a fantastic guild. I had a great time with all those guys. My brother was in there, my niece was in there, my nephew was in there. Any of you in Stark Industries who play with those guys will know what I'm talking about. They were all part of it. And it was a fantastic experience, and we got some server seconds. Needless to say, Celebrity did outdo us, which is fine. But now we're in this 25 environment. And for a while, everything's peachy. Everything is hunky-dory. The problem in Burning Crusade is not enough 10-man content. In fact, the only 10-man content I can recall offhand was Karazhan, Zul'Gurub, and Zul'Aman. The 10-man dungeons essentially became off things for the 25-man guilds. We're not in a period where Blizzard has said 10 and 25 are completely separate. That hasn't happened yet. 10-man is a subsect of 25-man raid guilds. The main raids are 25-man, okay? There's no such thing as we're a 10-man guild. I'm sure they existed and they raided Karazhan a lot, then they moved on to Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman respectively, but quite frankly, it was essentially you had to be a 25-man guild. We've gone from 40 to 25. We're not in the stage yet where we can go 25 to 10. Now, what we found is a lot of people saying they loved Karazhan. In fact, Karazhan is a breeder of a lot of issues. Karazhan is so overwhelmingly popular during the Burning Crusade and continued to be raided by the hardcore of the hardcore right until Wrath of the Lich King, is that Blizzard says we've got something here in 10-man raiding. We really do. And it's not their problem for thinking that, because Karazhan was ridiculously popular. Zul'Aman was proclaimed to be too hard if you weren't in a proper raiding 25-man guild, especially people who had access to shadow protection for Black Temple and stuff like that. Zul'Gurub was level 60, sorry, my mistake, it's 25-man raid. So we got Karazhan and Zul'Aman. And those two raids are pretty popular, especially as Zul'Aman rewards the bear mount, the Amani bear mount. And a lot of 25-man guilds made a lot of money running people through there. It's all running pretty smoothly, but people are more inclined to do Karazhan. Karazhan is just ridiculously popular. Wrath of the Lich King comes along. Blizzard tells us we're going to split raiding again. I'm going to break it down even more. 25-man raiding will still exist. We think that's worked, and overall it did work. The Burning Crusade, as we know, is a very, very successful raiding expansion for World of Warcraft. 25-man raiding seems to be working pretty well. Now we've got this 10-man, this Karazhan raid, which is ridiculously popular and caters to a lot more casual people. Especially when you look at towards the end of the expansion, it wasn't that difficult to do. Karazhan, remember, dropped the best enchants in the game, Mongoose and Sunfire, I want to call it, the Sunfire enchant, and Frost something, Shadow Frost, and also drops mounts. All sorts of crazy stuff dropped in Karazhan and was needed until the end of the expansion, so it's ridiculously popular for a number of reasons. So off we go into Wrath of the Lich King. Blizzard says we're going to split the guilds. You can be a 10-man guild and we will design a new raid lockout specifically for you. Blizzard also says 25-man will stay the same. Now 25-man is logistically harder and so on and so forth. So 25-man, normal and heroic will have better rewards than 10-man, normal and heroic. But there will be 4 different subsets. 10-man normal, 10-man heroic, 25-man normal, 25-man heroic. This gets messier and messier because now what's happened, similar to what happened with the 40-man raiding, is now you've got 25-man guilds who are carrying slackers. And it starts to dawn on people that no matter how small you make the raids, there are always better players than others. This is just a natural fact of the game. You can make the raids 5-man, there will always be worse players than other players. It doesn't matter. But this decision is sort of ignored. This enlightenment hasn't really come to fruition yet, as I think it has now. I think it has now, and we'll get there shortly. So now we're in this weird situation where we're going to split the raids even more. So obviously the guys who are in a 25-man mid-level guild, who are still doing sort of Serpent Shrine Cavern, still doing Tempest Keep, touching on the first few bosses in Black Temple and Hyjal after attunement was lifted, and now thinking, thank God, now we can kick the slackers. Exactly the same thing that happened in 40-man raiding. Exactly the same thing. We're going to kick those slackers. The established 25-man guilds aren't bothered at all. They're going to get better rewards. They've already said the loot will be better in 25-man. It's going to be better in 25 heroic even more. So the difference between a 25 heroic guild, gear-wise, and a 10-man normal guild is going to be extreme. An extreme difference. And remember, a lot of people in the big raiding guilds are very much interested in loot. So they're over the moon. They're really, really happy. And the guys in 25-man guild who just want to play with their friends, always comes down to this. I just want to play with my friends. You've got to remember, in my opinion, this has really contributed to the devaluing of community. Because every single step we've taken in the PvE world has reduced the need to be with new people. Every time we've reduced the raid size down, we reduce the need to be with new people, instead of encountering a lot more variety of people. In a 40-man guild where you can kind of invite anybody and everybody to fill a raid spot, you sometimes stumble across these really great people. As you start chopping and trimming away at the size of the raids, we reduce that possibility even more, to the point where we're generally looking at just other guilds to borrow players from. The top 25 heroic guilds are just looking from the 25 other guilds on the server and picking the best players from there, and that stuff still goes on to this day. But we have much less opportunity to invite en masse. It wasn't uncommon in a 40-man guild to see a lot of accepted trials, because there's loads of room. You can find space for trials in a 25 and a 10-man. Imagine how much room for trials there is in a 40-man. You can just keep bringing people in and giving them a try. If they're terrible, it's no problem. We can bring anybody and everybody into the raid. I really do think this devalued the value of community. Devalued community, I should say there. So now we're in Wrath of the Lich King. 10-man starts off, and 10-man is noticeably easier than 25. It didn't happen until Ulduar that we really saw this kick into gear as it being significantly easier, because Naxxramas and Sartharion and Malygos were incredibly easy bosses. They really were crazy easy. But of course, you've got different rewards in 10-man, and noticeably worse, which really pissed off the 10-man guilds, and rightfully so. Not only do you get stuff like the Undying in 10-man, which I'm sure somebody out there is going to say I prefer this, but you got the Immortal in 25-man, which is just outrageously better in my opinion, and with the opinion of many others. And if you saw someone with the Immortal, although technically you've achieved the same thing in 10-man, there's more risk in 25 with that achievement, which is true, and they get a noticeably better title. Still pisses off the 10 and 25s, and they get this divide occurring. 10-mans get really, really shit on, and just don't get a look in. Sites like WoW Progress do not even track 10-man achievements. They're not interested, they're not bothered, especially as 25-man. Remember that we've now got shared lockouts. 25-man guilds can also run 10-man guilds, 10-man raids. They can run their 25-man and then run multiple 10-mans. Therefore, you can't distinguish between the two. The 25 guilds are also getting better gear from their 25-man raids, better gear by design, then going back to the 10-mans to collect other gear and still dwarfing them, so they've got an even easier time. So 10-man guild, a strict 10-man guild, which would seem to be the word that popped around a lot. Strict 10-man guild. A strict 10-man guild not only had worse gear to compete with those dungeons, but they also got to do them generally after the 25-man guilds had just gone in and stomped it in much better gear. Really weird time. Ulduar hits. 10-man again is significantly easier, but we starting to see shared things occurring. A little bit of a leniency towards this. The gear is still separated significantly, but Ulduar in 10-man is also great fun, and has similar sort of achievements to collect the mazes and stuff. Ulduar again, just an overall fantastic instance, and not easy to compare the two, because 10 and 25 had a great time in Ulduar. We can say though that significantly 10-man was easier, especially the hard modes. 10-man Mimiron was much easier than 25 Mimiron. Firefighter, that achievement's called. Algalon 10-man was significantly easier than the 25-man. Hodir hard mode, Freya 3 Elders was really easy in 10-man hard mode. Freya 3 Elders was really easy, but very, very difficult in 25 heroic. I know, I did them all. Trial of the Crusader. Trial of the Crusader, a huge fail on all accounts, but Trial of the Crusader, significantly more difficult in 25 heroic. Massively. A new barrack, 25 heroic, was very, very difficult. I was in Method at the time, and we almost got the flawless 10-man heroic achievement in my run on the first day of it being out. It wasn't difficult. We just smashed through that instance. I remember being a trial in the guild at the time, and Protec, a very famous paladin, saying to the raid, this is really, really important. No pressure. I'm a trial, right? No pressure, but this is really important that we get this kill. Unfortunately, we didn't, because we didn't understand how permafrost worked. So it didn't really work out in our favour. Just one of those things that doesn't work out. But I remember at the time being incredibly nervous. But we almost smashed it to bits on the first day. Very much easier. 25 heroic new barrack, although it did die in the first week, was incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. It in fact died to the abuse of... I can't call it a bug, but essentially it was a bug and not an intentional way of doing the fight. Paragon did that. Paragon discovered some very nice tricks with Holy Wrath, which allowed them to get the world first, which was pretty funny when we saw how they did it, especially as there's a lot of theory crafting going on about how to defeat a new barrack on 25 heroic. Then you find out Paragon have done it, and then you see the video and you're like, mother of God, what cheese. So we're now coming into Icecrown Citadel. Icecrown Citadel really, really sucked if you were a 10-man guild, because you were punished so hard. I was now in a 10-man guild of friends. We were really in a 10-man guild of friends. This really suffered our progress, because this 10-man guild of friends were significantly good players. I mean really, really good. Some of the best guys I've ever played with. We're in this 10-man group of friends. Nothing special, nothing organised. It was part of Kill Count Lost, my previous 25-man guild. And they were generally just the best players we could find from there. It was almost impossible to do certain fights if you tried to do them the proper way of being a strict 10-man guild. And we were a strict 10-man guild. We didn't raid 25. In fact, we had one player who was in a 25-man guild who came to our 10-man lockout, and he did so much more damage. So much more that the difference in gear was really making a difference. We then run up against Saurfang. Saurfang 10-man heroic in 10-man normal gear, ridiculously difficult. Very, very difficult, especially on the healers. I'm sure if Blubzor was here, he'd remind us of trying to do 10-man heroic Saurfang during appropriate gear levels. Ultimately, in order to win, 10-mans had to start doing 25 pugs, or joining in on 25-man guilds alt raids in order to get some items. This is a real problem with the 10 and 25-man system that got abolished. Having the dual lockouts and 4 different tiers of gearing created such a huge separation that now 10-man guilds are really being shit on. Incredibly shit on. Not having a great time whatsoever. Something needs to change. So now we roll into modern day Cataclysm. And now Blizzard says 10 and 25 are going to be equally as hard. I'm going to say right now that is a complete impossibility. They know it. They will try their hardest though. They will get it as close as possible. But 10 and 25 cannot possibly ever be on an equal difficulty for a number of reasons. A huge vast array of reasons. Not at least with the class balance and cooldown usage. Simple things like that just completely make it not possible. So we decide it's going to be equally as difficult. We bite the bullet and trust in Blizzard. We have faith in you, Blizzard, that you can do this. We know we've got good players. We knew it. We knew that our 10-man core setup was fucking awesome. Really, really good players. One of the best, I'm going to say it, the best Death Knight I ever played with. And he's a killing machine, and he's called Drokthar. He was fucking incredible. Absolutely incredible. One of the best hunters I ever played with. One of the best druids I ever played with. Certainly the best shadow priest I have ever played with. Best warrior tank I've ever played with. And me. And a couple of other guys mixed in there. And a certain Greek rep paladin who had an inappropriate time with his clock and could never ever be on time. That's a small in-joke for a little inside, I know, for the other guys who remember him. He's still a great friend, but could never get out of bed on time. Something to do with the Greek economy, apparently. And it was a fantastic time. Really good. Cataclysm launches. We level super fast. I level 3 classes. This is before I did YouTube. I level all the tank classes. In fact, I level my DK, my warrior, my druid, and my... That's it? Yeah. Paladin. There we go. And I primarily raided on my druid, as our tank was a warrior. So we wanted good synergy. I raided on my druid. I brought 5% crit. We worked out our setup so that every single buff was there. Every single buff, because that is really, really important in this new 10-man environment, that every single buff is there. So I'm like, well, we need 5% crit. I'm going to roll on the Feral Druid then. Everyone's like, cool, that's really awesome. Gives us access to everything we need. Group synergy, very important to seriously hardcore players. So different from vanilla, right? Where you could go without hit cap. Now we're in Cataclysm, where we're really planning what classes we're going to play. This is how the game has evolved into this what we have today. And I love both ends of the stick, I really do. So now we've got this 10-man is equally as high as 25-man. And Blizzard, unfortunately, get it massively, massively wrong. What happened at the beginning of Cataclysm ever happened is literally beyond the comprehension of any sane individual. 10-man heroic is so difficult in comparison to the 25-man bosses that no sense can be made of any of the decisions that were made on those bosses whatsoever. Idiot things. That's before we get into the completely broken bosses. The lack of interrupts. Tanks now having to be hit capped in 10-man, which significantly reduces your defensive capability. I was lucky. We had an ongoing argument in our guild because Feral Druid Skull Bash could never miss. I assumed that tanks just could not miss interrupts. Because mine never missed and I wasn't hit capped. I was saying to the other warrior, saying my pummel is missing. And my warrior off tank, or main tank, whatever you want, well, my warrior partner, was never stupid. And he's straight up in my face. He's like, why are your interrupts never missing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm talking in specific now to Halphus Wormbreaker Heroic. The first boss in the dungeon. The first boss, Halphus Wormbreaker Heroic. And interrupts are so vital there, but you've got very, very limited people to interrupts. Halphus required 2 interrupters in order to be successful. However, Halphus Heroic 10-man's DPS timer was so tight, so incredibly tight, that you had to not let the DPS interrupt. Incredibly bad design. The DPS needs to be so high in order to cope with Halphus Wormbreaker Heroic in his original form that the DPS just cannot interrupt. We say to the DK, how much of a DPS loss is it for you to interrupt? Remember, this is before free Mind Freeze, and where Frost was viable. He has to be unholy. He's a massive DPS loss. I have to save runic power instead of just zerging the shit out of the bosses. We say to the rogues, how much of a DPS loss is it? We had 1 rogue. Well, we had 2 rogues, Genji and Mortar, but we only brought 1 per raid. It's a huge DPS loss. I have to save energy instead of spamming balls to the wall. You know, it's a DPS loss. Whereas for the tanks, it's not a DPS loss because our DPS is slightly irrelevant. So we've got this real tricky fucking situation where the tanks are trying to interrupt. Halphus Wormbreaker Heroic requires, in its original form, required you to release 3 Drakes at the pull. 3 Drakes, which hit incredibly hard, the boss, and a ton of whelps. I cannot express to you how difficult planning the pull of Halphus Wormbreaker was. We had to have people strategically positioned around the room in order to create a death ball instantaneously, and we had to do incredible amounts of threat and interrupt all at the same time, which meant that none of us could move Halphus, with meteors dropping on our balls. The healing was so intense, the healers had their own maths program for working it out, and ultimately you could only do it with Atonement Priest. It was crazy, and then barely get the kill. That video is on my channel. The reaction to that kill, it's in horrible quality, is on my channel. You can go and check that out. And that was the world 13th kill that we got on Halphus Wormbreaker after something like 400 attempts. It was stupidly hard. But you're saying to me, Preacher, why don't you just go do some of the other bosses in the Blackrock dungeon? Omnitron Defense System required systematic use of raid-wide cooldowns. We didn't have access to them. 10-man groups just generally did not have access to them. You needed things like Power Auras, you needed raid walls, you needed all sorts of crazy shit to survive that. You needed power word barriers. We didn't have a healing priest. We had a shadow priest, we didn't have a healing priest. Now we're fucked. Maybe the priest should go shadow. Yeah, but now we're missing a good DPSer. Magmar had so much health that you could possibly kill him before the Berserk timer. I think that was the boss that had the same health as the 25-man version. Who missed that? So let's get back to the subject. Is that 10-man is horribly broken. So horribly broken that we were trying... I mean, Halphus Wormbreaker, the first boss on Heroic, basically broke the guild apart. We worked so hard for that kill. And then we moved on to the second boss, which was Valiona and Thralion. And in their area, the ads that spawn in there have the same health as a 25-man version. It was just impossible. And this wasn't fixed for months after Cataclysm was released. I mean 4 months or something like that. We couldn't kill any of the bosses. Magmar is horribly broken. Omnitron required us to re-roll. I capped my priest in order to get us that fight. And we did it eventually. I had to cap my priest so we had access to Power Wave Barrier. Halthus we could kill, and he did get easier the more gear we had after we practiced and practiced. But we now can't kill Valiona and Thoralion because they're broken. Magmar's broken, and Omnitron requires us to re-roll. The guild's burnt out. And then we got the Frost one, Throne of the Four Winds. I almost forgot that. Throne of the Four Winds Heroic required the Wind boss had a shield which needed to be broken. The only way this was possibly done in 10-man Heroic was to have a Frost Mage, which is a gimp to the raid anyway, prepare double I think Deep Freeze and 2 guaranteed crit Ice Lances. So you had to have a mage who was crit capped, and they had to reforge everything to become a crit capped Frost Mage, so they're totally gimp DPS elsewhere, just to break the shield, and a rogue blowing all cooldowns. You had to have a mage with Tricks of the Trade, crit capped, because if those spells did not crit, you could not break the shield. So you can get the idea, 10-man is doing crazy, crazy things. 25-man, however, 25-man Heroic Halthus Wormbreaker is one of the easiest bosses ever. And it's done by pugs. One of the easiest bosses in history. Because you have 1 million interrupters. Just 1 million interrupters. Crazy stuff going on like that. You know, you have just and they just dwarfed it. You had more tanks to tank the Drakes instead of just 2 tanks tanking all the Drakes. This kind of crazy stuff is going on. Magmar was Heroic was notoriously difficult and required kiting until he was fixed, but Omnitron was killable. Throne of the Four Winds, the first boss, was killable. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there was a few bosses that were easy. There was still bugs in 25-man. I'm not going to say they weren't. There were still bugs in the 25-man version, and of course you could kill one of the bosses on normal and progress through the dungeon. Another boss like Maloriak required split-second interrupting on a half-second timer, which again had to be done by the tanks. And we had so many people assigned to try and interrupt that spell. Such a mess. So now we're in this period where 10-man has got shit on. And the forums explode into all this rage and terror that 10-man is broken, 10-man's bullshit. Oh, a 10-man, I think a Korean guild managed to kill Magmar using some sort of weird stuff just before he was fixed. Or nerf. They called it a nerf. It was a fix. And this occurred and this kind of stuff went on. So my guild fell apart along with many others. Although I had some of the best players and really dedicated players, they just couldn't handle it anymore. It was too much. We're asking them to re-roll. We're having to do this. And then we sort of tried to make the decision is we'll just farm normal until the bosses are nerfed, which is horrible. For guys who are hungry for progress, who love to kill hard bosses, we're basically saying we need to wait for nerfs until these bosses are fixed before we can jump into it. Which is having that conversation with those guys on Vent as a guild master was horrible. Really horrible decision to be made, but we had to do it. And ultimately, the guys drifted away and fell apart. They were sick of the game. They'd been promised so much and fell apart. So moving through Cataclysm, things get better, which is fine. Blizzard learns from its mistakes, rebalances the first dungeons. 10-man Heroic still had its issues. Like Nefarian Heroic was outrageously difficult on 10-man. It needed really specific class setups. But we run into this issue that we're always going to have is difficult bosses require certain cooldowns to be present. 10-man always has that difficulty of making sure they have them. They can't have a significant roster as a 10-man guild. There's just not enough room. 25-man can afford to have them by proxy. They just have them cooldowns because they're carrying so many people. As we progress through Cataclysm, the balance just get a little bit better. Firelands is one of those dungeons where things went well. Some bosses were certainly easier, like Balrog Heroic on 10-man was easier. But I don't mind that. I think that makes a lot of sense, is that in 25-man, some bosses are easier. In 10-man, some bosses are easier. 25 Heroic Balrog was notoriously difficult. 10-man Heroic Balrog was very easy. However, the only people to get, I think the world first Ragnaros Heroic kill was done by Paragon after they killed it on 25 Heroic. Ragnaros was apparently extremely difficult. I never did it on 10-man. We now no longer share lockouts. So as a 25-man raider, I was no longer part of that. I literally heard from my friends who were raiding 10-man and other people in forums and stuff that Ragnaros 10 Heroic was just notoriously ridiculous. Really, really hard. Pointless to beyond reason. Purely due to knockbacks, I think. In 25-man, I can't speak for a 10-man guild, but we had lots of Moonkins. We brought lots of Moonkins, lots of Elemental Shamans to protect us from the Sons of Flame. 10-mans just can't do that. You can't pack a 10-man with just Moonkins. The whole thing just doesn't work. So the question is, what does Blizzard do now? Dragon Soul seems to be okay, but 25-man guilds during this entire devaluing process, and the fact that 10-man has become somewhat balanced, we'll say somewhat balanced, is there is more of a reason for the 25-man guilds to fall apart. As a player is lost from a 25-man guild, and through the reason I told this whole story is, one, we've started trimming the fat left and right since vanilla. We've cut everybody down to these all different sort of shapes and sizes, and now we've got the situation where Wrath of the Lich King was too easy, and as I spoke about in the Problem in the Mist video, is we have a lack of young raiding talent, I want to say. A young, thirsty raiding talent coming through. That doesn't exist anymore. So the top 25-man guilds are starting to run out of players and ultimately break down into 10. And as we said earlier in this discussion, is 25-mans are still carrying certain amounts of players. They're still carrying them. They still exist. So where do we go from now? Blizzard has openly said there's a huge problem. 25-man guilds are dropping left and right. They're disappearing. The two recent comments from Ghostcrawler regarding Blizzard's stance on this is there is no reason anymore to have a 25-man guild. Really? The gear is the same? They're pretty balanced now. People are starting to take more note of the 10-man guilds. What are we going to do? 25-man still carries that weight of being the raid to be in. I'm sure it still does. It still, and it always will be, I think. But there's just less and less of them, and so we're going to end up in a fight with just 3 competitors, and everybody else is 10-man. And it's like, oh, that guild got the 25-man heroic. Great. You know, what do we do now? What do we do now? So let's see what's going on here. Okay, so we've got plenty of people here. Let's see your opinion. If you're Blizzard, what do you do now? They're still trying to work out what the hell to do with 25-man raiding. They're not happy with the way it is. But there's certain answers which just don't work anymore. Dual lockouts doesn't work, I don't think. Dual lockouts just shits on the 10-man. Because 25-man naturally has access to more gear. What you can easily have is 25-man overgearing 10-man very, very quickly and crushing the need for any sort of 10-man achievement. We can't really have the different gear separation between the two anymore. It creates such a large gap that it's really just unfair. If you're saying that 10 and 25 are balanced, then you can't have a gear separation. You can't motivate 25-man raiders by giving them better gear because now 10-man is just raiding the same difficulty of content for less rewards. That's not fair either. Can we go back to a system where 10-man gets worse gear? Let's say it's not balanced anymore and they say 10-man is easier, 25-man's harder, they will get better gear. I don't think we could do that either now because already the 10-mans are becoming the majority. And, you know, Blizzard doesn't like to shit on the majority. You think you should keep 25 but make the gear the same so that people won't have to raid twice? Well, that's just the situation we're in now, right? I think we're in that situation now. Keep the same as it is, but remove the shared lockout so you could do both at 10 and 25 in 1 week. But now you're back to the situation where the 25ers will get more gear, like I just said, and go back and crush the 10-man. So you're shitting on the 10-man guilds. You're shitting on the majority. Merge low pop realms to increase the amount of players. I see what you're saying by increasing the player pool, but I think we're slowly trying to push people back. I think Cataclysm did a lot of things correctly with its raiding, including motivate new players to get back in there. Wrath of the Lich King cut the player chain in half of new players coming through. In Vanilla and TBC, we had a steady stream of people who are ready to become raiders. And believe me, it takes some doing to become a proper raider. I'm talking about in a progress guild. It takes some level of learning curve to get there. Wrath of the Lich King cut the learning curve off, unfortunately. Cut it to death. And Cataclysm is slowly coming back. I feel it with Cataclysm did a hell of a lot right in that regard. It sounds like 10-man's the problem. Perhaps 10-man is the problem. But now you've got everybody in the 10-man. You can't just say 10-man doesn't exist anymore. Sure, you'll get the guys who are trying to merge, but that's 3 guilds at least who probably need to merge, and that's not easy. It's not. You're going to piss off the majority of players, so you can't do that. Blizzard can't piss off the majority of the subscriber base. They can't do it. 10-man getting worse is a bad idea. They can't do that. I'm looking forward to the concept of 15-mans. Switching to 15-mans is, of course, the viable solution they would like to put in place, but it's too late now. Mr. Pandaria is here. The first 2 raid tiers are out there. They can't do it now. They can't. They've already lost that option, unfortunately. They will be doing 15 mans. We know that. We know they will be going 15 mans. Scrap them and go 15. They should have done it now, I agree. As a new guild, it's hard to get 25 man. Maybe give them cool titles and stuff for 15 man. Solo raiding. 15 man hard to sell. I'm going to open this up for a second. But please don't spam. If you spam, I'll just switch it off again, unfortunately. Go back to unique rewards, like titles and shinier gear. But again, now you're saying that Blizzard's trying to make them both balanced, but now 25's getting better rewards. It's not fair either. It's not fair. As soon as the spam stops, you stop. What are your thoughts on heroic elite gear? Breach of your show, really love it, mate. Cool. Completely different raids decided just dedicated to each style. That's a lot of work as well. It's a lot of work. Different stuff, same stats. Oh, you're talking about pure looks. You know, that was one of the ideas that I had. Looks could do it. Because it adds some prestige. Do you have to then, though, sort of ensure that 25 looks better than 10? Because that's not fair, is it? If you're putting more effort into that. Of course, coolness and looks are subjective, so it's very easy to say that can't happen anyway. Different looking gear. I think we're beyond the time when we are happy to have just different coloured gear, like they've tried to get away with in the past. They very much tried to get away with just reshading things, and we're all a bit tired of it, and we're not happy with it. They'll still try and do it, I'm sure, but we're not happy with it. Different looks could do it a little bit. I think different looks could be a step in the right direction, as it makes them stand out as a 25 man. Gotta remember, people's needs are pretty easy. A lot of guilds feel that 25 man is naturally harder, whether they believe it's for a logistical sense or there's more people to manage, which again is logistics, but purely that kind of stuff, they will feel that 25 man is harder. I personally am of the opinion that 10 man is harder. I am. And only the boss difficulty level dictates otherwise. If both bosses are equally difficult, then 10 man should have a harder time, just due to lack of different buffs and ability to rescue situations through a variety of different players. You have one person who's sleepy in a 25 man, it's not that big of a deal. You have one person who's sleepy in a 10 man, that's a really big fucking deal. A healer dies in a 25, it is nowhere near as effective or as punishing as it is in a 10 man raid. I ultimately think if they're both bosses the same, the 10 man is more difficult. I genuinely believe that. I don't believe that the general population will ever believe that, but I'm pretty sure, I know that is the case. 10 mans are harder overall. 25s are definitely easier. 15 man is coming in the future, but they're looking for a solution for 25 man, and that's what we sort of wanted to open this up to. Is what do you think the solution is to 25 man? I'm going to come out and say it. I don't think there is one, without severely pissing off a lot of people. Ultimately, what I would like to see is a return to 40 man style raiding. I think that would be the best thing for the game. I genuinely do. I think I've reflected a lot on things I've said in the past about TBC and how great TBC was. I have a certain feeling that popped into the back of my... It's just popped in there. It sort of grew on me over the last week or so when I raised this topic and I was thinking about things to talk about and sort of the history lesson and taking you through it all. It sort of occurred to me as a side thought, like different things do. Was 25 man in TBC so good because we had so many 40 man guilds who cut the fat and had core players who were ready to rock and roll? Is that a contributing factor to the success of the 25 man raiding in the Burning Crusade? We had a lot of people who were hugely motivated by moving to 25 man. I think a lot of things happened over the history lesson. We've just learned a little bit in the game. such as we had this period. I think TBC can be looked on as a glory period because before that was great. Cutting away those extra players, and believe me, it was a godsend. It was. If you were a good player who was aware that you were carrying these bad players, it was a horrible time, and it really frustrated the hell out of you. And then came TBC, the shining star, which had some of the best raids ever created. Certainly some of the most interesting lore characters we've ever had in expansion. We not only had Lady Vash, but we had Kael'thas Sunstrider, we had Illidan Stormrage, and we had Kil'jaeden, all in one expansion. We had 4 Magtheridon thrown in there. These major lore characters were all part of it. So a golden age of raiding for sure. And of course we had the trimming of 40-man guilds. You no longer were carrying the fat. The better guilds got even better, and the average guilds got even better by proxy. By default, your guild got better if you were in those guilds. So of course TBC is a shining star in there. But then of course people naturally start to drift away, and now you've a bit fucked. And then Wrath of the Lich King comes and stomps all over raiding. You had probably still a solid core from early the Burning Crusade, but Wrath of the Lich King comes along and really shits on your roster. Because people can't be arsed with raiding easy content week after week, especially those who aren't interested in farming and those who got gear caps in the first few weeks, which is what happened in Wrath of the Lich King. They were gear caps, they were done, nothing else to farm. And now you want us to farm every week for other people who can be fucking arsed. I can't be arsed. I couldn't be interested whatsoever. So you've got this really weird situation which has led to this sort of weird moment we're in now. 25-man guilds, especially the progression guilds, are struggling to find new people who are good enough to contend. They still do eventually, but they generally have to go through a lot of trials. A hell of a lot of trials in order to find that. 10-man guilds are getting the breakdowns of the 25-man guilds. And that's not hard to find now. People leaving 25s and going 10-man. I'm sure we'll see members of Paragon who recently went 10-man joining the top guilds, and that's what happens. But every time that happens, a top guild has disappeared, and it all starts watering down. And now we're here. What are we going to do? I don't know what the answer is. I think overall, 15-man will probably be a solution for a while. And by the time 15-man is here, and certainly by the next expansion, most of us will have moved on, especially those of us who've lived with the game for a while will be moving on to something new. I'm pretty sure Mr. Pandaria will be the last expansion for a lot of us, especially with things like Project Titan coming. We're hoping that's going to be fantastic. And if not, there's bound to be something better by then. I think that's a pretty safe bet. I certainly think that a move to something bigger would be better. Bigger, more grand environment, and less emphasis on the bosses themselves in terms of difficulty. I think we're done with the difficult discussion. I think I'm tired of it. From my personal point of view, I'm tired of the heroic guilds asking for harder and harder bosses. I'm tired of the casual players asking for easier bosses. I want decent difficulty, but let us just bring more people. Let us bring more people who can be carried, because to be honest, I think that is the best thing from the game. I think that is awesome. I think if you've got a casual guild with 25 good people and 15 slackers who can make you entertained in a raid and have a good time with and always show up, and they help you kill the boss in some fashion, I think that's fine. I think we should aim for a more Ahn'Qiraj, Blackwing Lair level of difficulty. I think we should stay away from Naxxramas and Sunwell style difficulty. As much as it pisses off the really cutting edge, bleeding edge guilds, those guilds are dying a death because of that playstyle. And the only people who are suffering now because of this constant need for harder and harder difficulty are the casual player base. And ultimately Blizzard nerfs them anyway. So all we have is the hardcores have fun for a couple of months, and then they end up farming stupidly easy bosses for their skill level. It's just not fun. I don't want to see bosses nerfed. I don't want to see the 5% stacking debuffs on the raids. I don't want to see that anymore. We never needed it in the past. We don't need it now. I would just rather have, hey, you know what? I think the hardcore guilds have had enough fun. Not to shit on them, but they're becoming so majority, and I felt that for a little while, and I think Mr. Pandaria will be a last blast. There's some very, very difficult bosses coming up in Mr. Pandaria, and they'll be nerfed pretty quickly. I'm almost pretty sure of that. They'll be nerfed pretty quickly for the other guilds, and it's just demoralizing. It's demoralizing to the more regular guilds that kill these nerfed bosses. There's nothing nice about killing a boss for the first time knowing it's been nerfed to your level. It just feels shit. It just feels crap. Especially if you've been working on the harder boss. I'd much rather see a return to just grand scale raids, because no matter which way you cut it, seeing 40 gangsters all roll into a boss together looks miles better than any big boss coming out of the floor. It really does. The only thing better than seeing Kil'jaeden come out the floor is seeing 40 ballers waiting to kick his fucking teeth in rather than 25. I think it feels better. I think it allows for more mistakes, and I think for the general player base, it's a good thing. And it's, I know the question is, well, what about the hardcore? Because I would suffer from this as well. If I was still trying to do world first cutting edge progression, I would suffer from this decision. And it's not because I've left that environment that I don't feel that. I still intend to raid progress in some fashion in Mr. Pandaria. Where that will be, I don't know. But I still want to raid hard. But I'm one of the last people who really wants to do that. Some people think they want it. I don't think they realise what it really entails. They think they want it. But I don't think they really do. Even guilds in the top progression guilds get sick to death of a boss after they've wiped on it 20 or 30 times. They get really frustrated and pissed off. They don't really want it. What they want is a boss that's decently killable and is pretty difficult. I don't think 40 or 50 wipes or a few weeks of killing a boss is any big deal. I'd like to see a return to that. But I'd also like to see us move back to a just more grander, more epic feeling raid. Oh, okay, I'm almost done, ballers, because that's been an hour and 10-minute daily.
No, what time is it?
It's about 6.
Shit.
Well, that's caused a lot of problems. So, any other comments before we sign off for today? I don't know why that's doing that, but whatever. I'll trust you one more time. Everything is preachy.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to log off because I'm now 10 minutes late for a riding lesson and my horse is still in the field.
Oh, and is the woman there?
My God, I just did not realise the time whatsoever.
That's all happen.
Well,
It's all about the journey. Yeah.
I've got to try and catch the frigging thing now. It's eating all the grass, it won't never come in.
I don't like cordless mice.
Okay, I'll be back. Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Anything else? So everyone's sort of discussing it backwards and forwards. Everyone's saying hello to her. So we're going to call it there, balls. I think that was a good show. Hopefully not too preachy. Backwards and forwards. But I think that's a good overview. I'm not sure what the answer is. Watch the camera go. Emma's crawling under the camera, which I think is pretty awesome.
Hopefully that doesn't go up my skirt.
Nothing went up your skirt, luckily. Alright, guys. Have a fantastic weekend. As always, really enjoy your weekend. It's important. You'll appreciate it. Live show tomorrow. It's the awards ceremony. So if you've still not placed your votes for what you think was the best stuff in Cataclysm, go and do it now. PreachGaming.com. I'll close the voting sometime tomorrow afternoon. And we'll have a cheesy, low-tech as fuck awards ceremony at the web show with me and Ghost. I'll be joined by my #1 partner in crime, Ghosty, tomorrow at 8 PM. So it's 2 hours from this time if you're watching it live. 8 PM GMT. If you're not sure what time that is in your country, just Google 8 PM GMT in my country and it will tell you. It's pretty awesome. 8 PM GMT. Alright, ballers. Thank you for letting me rant. My mouth is incredibly dry. Oh! Before you go! I'm live streaming Dead Space 2 tonight. I totally forgot I was doing that. I totally forgot I was doing that. But I will be live streaming Dead Space 2. We tried some Dead Space 2. As you can see, we're in 1080p now. And we bought the new encoder, which is why I have that big button. So I've got like a proper encoder, which really ups the quality of the gaming over the stream. And we played some Dead Space 2 for about 10 minutes this afternoon, and people were really into it. So I'm desperate to play it as well. So I'm going to be streaming Dead Space 2 tonight from about 8 PM. So in about an hour and 3/4 from now. All that I have to do is, Emma's got to do a riding lesson. I need to walk Ben. I'm going to have a shower and some food. And then I'm going to be live streaming Dead Space 2 for the evening. Emma's going to play Guild Wars. It should be a good laugh. So I will be back in an hour and 3/4. Later, ballers.